She made me train my replacement, a 22-year-old who didn't know the difference between a boiler and a furnace, then fired me that same afternoon. Tuesday at 2:47 p.m. That's the exact time, because I looked at the clock on Tessa Olmsted's wall when she said the words. Not because I was surprised, because I wanted to remember it. She hadn't looked up from her MacBook Pro once since I sat down. Not when I walked in. Not when Sandra Mills from HR took her position behind Tessa's left shoulder, holding a tablet against her chest like a shield, eyes fixed on the carpet. Not when Tessa started talking about what she called right-sizing the human capital footprint. She said it the way someone reads a menu item they've already decided on, like the words didn't mean anything, like I didn't mean anything. The knowledge transfer protocols are now complete, she said. Kyle has been briefed on the core systems. We're confident in the transition. Kyle Turner, 22 years old, engineering degree from a state school, no industrial experience, and 4 hours of walking behind me through the equipment rooms that morning. 4 hours. I'd spent 26 years learning those systems. She gave him a morning. Tessa slid a manila envelope across the desk. 2 fingers, like she was pushing something under a door she didn't want to open. She still hadn't looked at me. Your severance terms are outlined inside. We appreciate your years of service. I picked up the envelope. I looked out the window behind her, past the parking lot, past her BMW in the reserved spot she'd labeled herself, to the smokestack rising over the mill. The number 3 recovery boiler was running. I could tell by the color of the exhaust. A thing you learn after 26 years, the way you learn your own heartbeat. I didn't say anything about Section 9C. Not yet. I understand, I said. That was all. My name is Virgil Ray Harding. I'm 55 years old. I spent 26 years as chief plant engineer at Olmsted Paper Mill, and before that, I spent 9 years in the United States Navy as a machinist's mate. Achieved the rank of Petty Officer First Class. I served aboard the USS Farragut and the USS Lassen, both Arleigh Burke-class guided missile destroyers running steam-powered propulsion plants. High-pressure boilers, main propulsion machinery, the kind of systems that will kill you and everyone around you if you don't respect them. I learned to respect them. The Navy taught me something else too. The men who shouted were usually the men who hadn't fixed the problem yet. The ones who solved things were quiet, methodical. They checked gauges, read logs, traced systems back to root cause. They didn't panic because panic doesn't tighten a flange or recalibrate a pressure valve. I carried that with me when I left the service at 27. I did contract maintenance work for 2 years after discharge. Boiler rooms, power plants, industrial, HVAC. Then Russell Olmsted shook my hand in 1998 and said, I know a machinist when I see one. Hired me on full time. I was 29. My wife Maggie, Margaret Ann Harding, she was a school librarian at Harwick Elementary. She died 6 years ago. Ovarian cancer, diagnosed late, gone in 11 months. She was the kind of person who remembered every kid's name in her library, and there were over 400 of them. Our son Daniel is 22 now, second year as an apprentice electrician with a union shop in Harwick. Lives in a studio apartment across town. Calls me every Sunday. Comes for dinner the first Friday of each month. He's building something with his hands, same as I did. I'm proud of him in a way I don't say out loud because I don't need to. He knows. After Maggie died, the mill became the thing that kept my days structured. Not in some sad, poetic way. In the practical way. You wake up, you drink black coffee, you drive to work. You keep 1,800 tons of specialty paper moving per week through a system that was built when Reagan was in his first term. You don't have time to fall apart when a century-old steam recovery boiler needs you at 3 a.m. If you've ever had a boss who didn't understand what you actually do, hit that like button and subscribe. Let me tell you what I built at that mill. Not designed, I didn't design the original systems, but I kept them alive, and in some cases, I rebuilt them from scratch with my own protocols when the original documentation had rotted or been lost or was never written down in the first place. The number 3 recovery boiler was installed in 1986. It's a specialized unit tied into the black liquor recovery cycle of the pulping process. Without it, the mill doesn't run. It doesn't slow down. It stops. There are maybe a dozen engineers in the northeastern United States who understand that specific generation of recovery boiler, and most of them are retired. I am not one of the ones who retired. In 2009, a main steam valve failed at 2 a.m. on a Thursday. The pressure spike nearly took the number 3 offline for a month. I was there in 40 minutes, worked through the night, had it stabilized by 6 a.m. and fully operational by noon. The mill never missed a shipment. In 2017, an outside contractor, a firm Tessa's father Garrett had recommended, as it happened, made a calibration error on the number 4 boiler that nearly caused a pressure rupture. If that vessel had ruptured, we wouldn't be talking about lost production. We'd be talking about funerals. I caught it during a routine walkthrough at 11 p.m. because I was running a secondary check I'd added to my own protocol list. A check that existed in no manual, no digital system, no corporate document. It existed in my head and in my handwritten logs, which I kept in a locked cabinet in the maintenance office. I saved that mill twice. And the week Maggie was dying, the week she deteriorated fastest, the week the hospice nurse told me it could be any day, I worked 2 overnight shifts because the number 3 boiler was showing pressure irregularities that nobody else knew how to diagnose. I kissed my wife at 9 p.m. and drove to the mill. I came home at 6 a.m., showered, sat with her for 2 hours, and went back. She died on a Wednesday. I was holding her hand when it happened, because Carter Brooks, my day shift supervisor, had covered for me that morning without being asked. I missed nothing at the mill, and I missed the last coherent conversation my wife ever had because I was recalibrating a feed water pump at 1 a.m. on a Monday. That's what 26 years costs. Now let me tell you about Section 9C. When Russell Olmsted hired me in 1998, the mill didn't have a corporate legal department. It had a local attorney named Bill Farnham who handled contracts, permits, and the occasional liability dispute. Russell sat me down in his office, oak desk, cedar paneling, a cigar he was still lighting in those days, and told me he'd watched 2 paper mills in the region collapse after their senior engineers retired without transition plans. One in 1991, one in 1996. Both times, the operational knowledge walked out the door and never came back. I'm not letting that happen here, Russell said. He had Farnham draft a clause into my employment agreement. Section 9C. It established that my accumulated operational documentation, my handwritten maintenance logs, my system maps of the steam infrastructure, my personally developed calibration protocols for the number 3 and number 4 recovery boilers, constituted co-developed intellectual property between me and the mill. Standard enough. Companies do this. But here's what made Section 9C different. Russell insisted on a protection clause for me, not just for the company. In the event of involuntary termination without cause, all proprietary documentation, system maps, and calibration protocols developed by me would revert exclusively to my ownership within 24 hours of formal termination notice. The company would retain no license to use, copy, or instruct from those materials without my written consent. Russell's reasoning was simple. He said, "If I'm ever stupid enough to fire you without good reason, I deserve to lose access to your work." That was Russell. Fair to a fault. I kept the original signed agreement in a fireproof lockbox at home for 26 years. A machinist who doesn't keep his documents is like a machinist who doesn't keep his tools. The night I was fired, Tuesday, 6:15 p.m., I sat at my kitchen table with 3 fingers of bourbon and called Dennis Whitfield. Dennis is 53, maritime and industrial IP attorney out of Portland, Maine. Navy veteran. Former machinist's mate, Petty Officer Second Class. We served on the same class of destroyer. He went to law school on the GI Bill after discharge. He's one of maybe 5 attorneys in New England who knows what a steam recovery boiler actually is. I read him Section 9C over the phone. Word for word, there was a pause. Then Dennis said, "They fired you without reading their own contracts." That's correct. Virgil, that clause is still valid. No subsequent IP assignment was ever signed. I'm guessing their legal team never reviewed the original agreement before terminating you. Patricia Reed warned her twice. She was ignored both times. Another pause. Your termination was verbal today. When does HR process the formal paperwork? Tomorrow morning. Good. That gives us time to establish the timestamp. I'll file formal notice of the reversion first thing, and I'm registering your copyright claim on the calibration documentation with the U.S. Copyright Office tomorrow afternoon. Is that necessary? It's a belt and suspenders, but I want the belt and the suspenders. Registration number, federal timestamp, chain of custody. Nobody argues with the Copyright Office. I took a sip of bourbon. What about the physical logs? The ones in my cabinet at the mill. They're yours. They always were. That's the whole point of Section 9C. The digital copies on the company server are covered by the reversion too. As of 24 hours after your formal termination notice, Olmsted Paper Mill has no legal right to use, copy, or instruct from any of it without your written consent. And Kyle Turner? The replacement? He has nothing. No valid documents. No calibration protocols. No system maps. Whatever she had him write down in 4 hours of shadowing you is his personal notes. And personal notes from a 22-year-old who can't tell a boiler from a furnace won't keep a century-old steam system running. I looked out the kitchen window. The mill's smokestack was visible from my house, 2 miles away, lit by the security floods. It had been visible from this window for 26 years. File it, I said. Dennis filed the formal notice of reversion Wednesday at 11:30 a.m. 30 minutes before, HR finished processing my termination paperwork. The timing was unambiguous. That afternoon, he registered the copyright claim. Registration number T X88479291. Then, I poured another cup of black coffee, sat on the back deck with the dog, a yellow lab named Rex who'd been leaning against my leg since the night before like he knew something had shifted. And I waited. I didn't call the mill. I didn't check my email. I didn't post anything online. I just waited. Because I'd spent 9 years in the Navy and 26 years in a boiler room. And if those 35 years taught me anything, it's that pressure builds on its own schedule. You don't rush it. You don't force it. You read the gauges, you check the logs, and you wait for the system to tell you what it's going to do. Tick, tick, tick. If you've ever been let go by someone who didn't understand what you actually did for the company, hit that like button and subscribe. Wednesday was quiet. Thursday was quiet. Friday, I drove to the hardware store, bought a new set of hinges for the back screen door that had been sagging since September, and spent the afternoon replacing them. Rex lay on the deck and watched me work. It was the first time in 6 years I'd had a weekday with nothing scheduled and nowhere to be. And I'll be honest, it felt wrong. Not sad, just wrong. Like a machine running without load. The RPMs are fine, but nothing's being produced. Saturday, Daniel came over. Not his usual First Friday dinner. He just showed up at noon with a bag of sandwiches from the deli on 4th Street and sat at the kitchen table. "You seem different this week," he said. "Less stressed. Like you're actually here when you're here." "I got fired, Dan." He put his sandwich down. "What?" "Tuesday afternoon. Tessa Olmsted." He was quiet for a long time. Daniel doesn't react fast. He got that from me. Or maybe from Maggie. She was the same way. Let the information settle before responding. "What are you going to do?" "Wait." He looked at me the way a 22-year-old looks at his father, when his father says something that either sounds like wisdom or sounds like giving up, and he can't tell which. I didn't explain further. He didn't ask. We ate our sandwiches. He left at 2. I sat on the back deck with Rex and watched the smokestack 2 miles away. Sunday evening, 8:47 p.m. My phone buzzed. Carter Brooks. The text was 2 lines. Boiler pressure readings are off on number 3. Kyle doesn't know what he's looking at. Nobody does. Asterisk, I read it twice. Set the phone down on the deck railing. Picked up my bourbon. I knew what pressure readings are off meant on the number 3 recovery boiler. It meant the feed water balance was drifting. It meant whoever was managing the system wasn't catching the micro adjustments that needed to happen every 90 minutes during the black liquor recovery cycle. Those adjustments weren't in any digital system. They weren't in any manual. They were in my calibration protocols, the ones that now legally belong to me, and in the muscle memory of 26 years of walking that floor. Kyle Turner had 4 hours of shadowing and whatever notes he'd scribbled in a spiral notebook. He didn't have my protocols. He couldn't have my protocols. They were in a locked cabinet he had no key to, and even if he'd broken the lock, the documents inside were my intellectual property as of Wednesday at 11:30 a.m. Registration T X8847291. I didn't respond to Carter's text. Monday, another text from Carter. Tessa brought in a contractor from Albany. Guy took one look at the number 3 and asked for the calibration documentation. Nobody could produce it. He said he won't touch the system without it. Asterisk Tuesday. Carter again. Kyle tried to run the number 4 on the standard manufacturer specs. Pressure fluctuations are getting worse. We're down to 60% output. Tessa held a meeting and used the phrase temporary calibration variance 4 times. Temporary calibration variance. I almost smiled. Almost. Wednesday morning, 8 days after I was fired. My phone rang at 6:47 a.m. Carter, I picked up. It blew Virgil. He didn't need to say what. I could hear it in his voice. The flatness of a man describing something he knew was coming, but couldn't stop. Number 3? Number 3. Main steam header failed at 4:22 a.m. Emergency shutdown triggered automatically, but the secondary containment valve, the one you rebuilt in 2014, didn't seat properly because nobody knew the manual override sequence. We've got steam damage in the recovery bay. The pulping line is down. The whole floor is down. Injuries? No. Thank God. Night crew followed your emergency evacuation protocol, the one you drilled them on every quarter. Good. Virgil, the whole mill is shut down. Everything. Tessa's in her office with the door closed. Kyle Turner is sitting in the break room staring at his hands. The Albany contractor packed his tools and left at 5 a.m., said he's not liable for equipment he wasn't given documentation to operate. I looked at Rex. He was lying on the kitchen floor, chin on his paws, looking at me the way he did, like he understood everything, but had chosen not to comment. I hear you, Carter. What do I tell the crew? Tell them to follow lockout-tagout procedures on every system connected to the number 3 and keep the floor clear. That's it? That's it. I hung up, set the phone on the kitchen table, poured black coffee into the mug Maggie had given me 12 years ago, the one with the chipped handle I never replaced. I sat down and drank it. Over the next 48 hours, my phone became a small, persistent machine of escalation. I watched it the way you watch a pressure gauge, not with urgency, but with professional interest. Carter texted at noon Wednesday. Production halted completely. All lines down. Shipping department has nothing to load. Drivers sitting in the lot. Carter again. Thursday morning. Tessa tried to access your maintenance cabinet. Found it empty. You took the physical logs? Asterisk I had. Monday after the firing. I drove to the mill at 6 a.m. before the day shift arrived. Used my key. Nobody had thought to collect it. Opened my cabinet. loaded 26 years of handwritten maintenance logs into 3 cardboard boxes, and drove home. Placed them in the fireproof lockbox next to the original employment agreement. My logs, my handwriting, my intellectual property. Thursday at 10 a.m., an email forwarded by Carter. Tessa had sent a company-wide message titled Operational Pause, Path Forward. It contained phrases like proactive maintenance recalibration, system modernization opportunity, and temporary operational agility adjustment. It did not contain the words catastrophic failure or we fired the only person who knew how to run this. Thursday at 1 p.m., Carter. 2 reps from Harwick Packaging were here, walked through the floor, saw the damage, walked out without saying a word. That's the $28 million contract, Virgil. Thursday at 2:30 p.m., Morrison Printing sent a formal inquiry about production timeline. That's the other $14 million. $42 million in specialty contracts. 2 clients. Walking. Thursday at 3:15 p.m., Patricia Reed has been in her office with the door closed since this morning. Her assistant said she's been pulling files from the archive room. That one I read twice. Patricia Reed was not a careless attorney. She'd warned Tessa. Twice. She'd been ignored. And now she was doing what a competent general counsel does when the building is on fire. She was reading the contracts. I set the phone down, walked to the back deck. Rex followed. The smokestack 2 miles away was cold. No exhaust, no color to read. For the first time in 26 years, the mill was silent. And then, Thursday at 4:15 p.m., my phone rang. Not a text. A call. The caller ID said, Ol Emstead Paper Mill. Maine. I looked at the screen, watched it ring. 1 ring, 2, 3, 4. I thought about the number 3 boiler sitting cold in the recovery bay. I thought about Kyle Turner in the break room staring at his hands. I thought about Tessa Olmsted in her glass-walled office, surrounded by 47 slides of operational excellence, watching her entire modernization collapse because she'd fired the one man who knew where the heartbeat of that mill lived. 5 rings. I thought about Maggie, about the Monday night I missed her last coherent conversation because I was recalibrating a feedwater pump at 1 a.m. for a company that had just thrown me away like a spent gasket. 6 rings. Rex looked up at me from the deck. Steady eyes, patient. I pressed the red button. Click. The call I declined at 4:15 p.m. was from Patricia Reed. I know because she called back at 4:16 and 4:18 and 4:22. I didn't answer any of them. At 4:31, a voicemail notification appeared. I let it sit for 10 minutes. Then I played it. Patricia's voice was steady, but there was something underneath it. The careful steadiness of someone who has spent the last 6 hours staring at a document and understanding, clause by clause, exactly how bad things are. Virgil, so this is Patricia Reed. I need to speak with you. It's regarding your employment agreement, specifically Section 9C. I understand if you're not inclined to take my call right now, but I'm asking you to call me back. Today. Please. I set the phone down, picked up my bourbon. 3 fingers. The good stuff, not the daily drinker. Rex was still on the deck, chin on his paws. I didn't call her back. What I knew, and what Patricia had just discovered, was this. She'd pulled my original employment agreement from the archive room. She'd read Section 9C. She'd seen the co-developed intellectual property clause. She'd seen the automatic reversion trigger upon involuntary termination, without cause. And then she'd checked whether any subsequent IP assignment agreement had been executed in the 26 years since. There wasn't one, because nobody had ever asked me to sign one, because Russell trusted a handshake, and every legal team after Bill Farnham assumed the original agreement had been superseded by standard corporate policy. It hadn't. Section 9C was still active, still binding, still exactly what Russell and Bill Farnham wrote in 1998. Then Patricia would have checked the termination paperwork. Involuntary, without cause, processed Wednesday morning. And then, if she was thorough, and Patricia Reed was thorough, she would have searched for any filings related to the reversion. She would have found Dennis Whitfield's formal notice, filed Wednesday at 11:30 a.m., 30 minutes before HR finished processing, and she would have found the U.S. Copyright Office registration. TX 8847291. Federal timestamp. Chain of custody. Virgil Ray Harding, sole author. That's the moment Patricia Reed would have closed the file, sat back in her chair, and said the words I imagine she said, because it's what anyone says when they finally see the whole picture. Oh no. And then again, quieter. Oh no. At 4:15 p.m., the same minute she first called me, Patricia Reed also called Russell Olmsted. I know this because Russell told me later. He said he was sitting in his study at home, the oak-paneled room with the leather chairs and the cedar smell, the unlit cigar in his breast pocket, when Patricia's name appeared on his phone. We have a situation, she said. Russell told me her exact next words. Your granddaughter terminated Virgil Harding without cause last Tuesday. She did not consult legal before doing so. She did not review his employment agreement. That agreement contains a clause, Section 9C, that automatically reverts ownership of all proprietary operational documentation to Virgil upon involuntary termination without cause. His attorney has already filed formal notice. The reversion is complete. The calibration protocols, the maintenance logs, the system maps, all of it belongs to Virgil. Legally, irrevocably. The mill has no license to use any of it. Russell was quiet for a long time. Then he asked, how long has she known about this clause? She didn't know. She never read the agreement. I warned her twice to review all employment contracts before making personnel changes. I have those warnings in writing. What about the boiler? The boiler failed because nobody had access to Virgil's calibration protocols. The contractor from Albany refused to work without documentation. The replacement, Kyle Turner, had 4 hours of training and no valid materials. Mr. Olmsted, your mill is producing nothing. It has been producing nothing for 36 hours, and without Virgil's written consent, we cannot legally use any of the documentation needed to restart the number 3 recovery system. We are not in a negotiating position. We are in a begging position. Russell told me he sat in that study for 20 minutes after hanging up. He stared at the framed photograph on his desk, the one taken in 1982, the year he bought the land, and poured the foundation for the mill. He was 37 in that photo, 43 years ago. Then he picked up his keys, walked past his wife without explaining where he was going, climbed into his '09 F-150 with 140,000 miles on it, and drove to my house. He arrived at 7:30 p.m. I heard the truck in the driveway. Rex heard it too. Lifted his head, ears forward, then settled. Rex knows the sound of Russell's truck. Russell had been to this house before. He'd come to Maggie's funeral. He'd come to the house afterward with a casserole his wife made, and a bottle of bourbon he set on the counter without a word. I opened the front door. Russell stood on the porch in a golf shirt and khaki slacks, the unlit cigar in his breast pocket. He looked 10 years older than the last time I'd seen him. The stroke had taken something from his face. Not symmetry, exactly, but certainty. The jaw that used to be set like a load-bearing wall had softened. Virgil. Russell. Can I come in? I held the door open. He walked to the kitchen table. The same table where I'd sat with Dennis on the phone Tuesday night, where Daniel and I had eaten deli sandwiches on Saturday, and sat down in the chair facing the window. The chair that looked out at the smokestack 2 miles away. The cold smokestack. I poured him 3 fingers of bourbon. He took it. Didn't drink yet. I let family cloud my business judgment, he said. I sat down across from him. Didn't respond. He wasn't done. Patricia called me an hour ago. told me everything. The clause, the filing, the copyright registration. I read that agreement 26 years ago. Virgil. I'm the one who told Bill Farnham to put Section 9C in there. I said if I was ever stupid enough to fire you without good reason, I deserved to lose access to your work. He looked at the bourbon. Turns out my granddaughter was stupid enough for both of us. She's 24. She's the chief operations officer of a company she can't operate. I let that sit. Virgil, the mill is down. Completely. Production hasn't moved in 36 hours. Carter Brooks tells me we're looking at 3 weeks minimum to restart the number 3, and that's only if someone who knows the system does the work. The Harwick packaging contract, $28 million. They've already contacted Morrison Printing about alternate suppliers. Morrison's own $14 million order is under formal review. If both contracts walk, that's $42 million gone. The production halt alone is costing $6.1 million. My mill is bleeding out, and the only surgeon who can stop it is sitting across this table drinking bourbon with me. That's a fair summary. Russell finally took a sip, set the glass down carefully. His hands were steady. 79 years old, and the man still had steady hands. I need you back. I know. I'm not asking you to come back to the same arrangement. I'm asking you to come back as a partner. 7% ownership stake. Equity. Real equity. Not a title on a business card. You'll have a seat at the table. Not because I'm desperate, though I am, but because you should have had it 10 years ago, and I was too set in my ways to see it. I looked at him. Russell Olmsted, 79 years old. Built that mill from a regional supplier into a specialty paper house that ran 1,800 tons a week. Shook my hand in 1998 and said he knew a machinist when he saw one. Came to my wife's funeral. Sat at this table before. What about Tessa? Russell's jaw tightened. Just slightly. The old load-bearing wall, showing one last crack. I'll handle Tessa. Handle her how? He looked at me. Then he pulled his phone from his pocket and set it on the table. Now, if you'll let me use your kitchen. I nodded. Russell dialed. Put it on speaker. It rang twice. Grandpa? Tessa's voice was tight. Not scared yet. Tight the way someone sounds when they know the phone call is coming, but haven't accepted what it means. Tessa, I'm removing you from your position at the mill effective immediately. Your access credentials will be deactivated tonight. Your personal belongings will be boxed and sent to your father's address. Silence. 3 seconds. 4. You can't do that. I'm the COO. The modernization plan is... There is no modernization plan. There is a mill that isn't running, $6.1 million in losses, and $42 million in contracts walking out the door, because you fired the only man who could keep the heart of that operation beating, without reading a contract that I personally wrote to prevent exactly this kind of stupidity. Grandpa, if you would just listen. I listened to a 47-slide deck 13 months ago, and it was the worst business decision I've made in 45 years. You didn't modernize my mill, Tessa. You broke it. And you broke it because you thought a Stanford MBA and 1 semester of auditing restaurant supply chains qualified you to overrule 26 years of operational expertise. I heard something on the other end. Not words. A sound. The sound of someone realizing that confidence and competence are not the same thing, and that the distance between them can be measured in millions of dollars and a cold smokestack. This is done, Russell said. I'm sorry, sweetheart, but this is bigger than family. He ended the call, set the phone face down on the table, picked up his bourbon and drank it in one slow pull. Neither of us said anything for a while. Rex padded over and lay down between our chairs, his weight warm against my ankle. 7%, Russell said again. Quiet now. I want it in writing. Dennis Whitfield reviews the agreement before I sign. I'd expect nothing less. And I want Kyle Turner kept on staff. Russell looked at me, surprised. First time I'd surprised him in 26 years. The kid has an engineering degree and no ego left, I said. That's a starting point. I'll train him properly. Not in 4 hours, over 2 years. The way it should be done. Russell nodded slowly. I should have trained Tessa that way. I should have made her sweep the floor before I let her touch the controls. Yes. He stood. I stood. He extended his hand. I shook it. Same handshake as 1998. Firm. Dry. The grip of a man who built something with his hands and respected other men who did the same. He drove home in his F-150. I stood in the doorway and watched the taillights disappear. Then I went back to the kitchen table, poured one more finger of bourbon, sat in the chair facing the window. The smokestack was dark, but it wouldn't be for long. It took 3 weeks to bring the mill back. I was on that floor 14 hours a day for the first 11 days, rebuilding the main steam header, reseating the secondary containment valve, recalibrating every pressure circuit on the number 3 and number 4 recovery boilers using my own protocols, my own logs, my own hands. Kyle Turner was beside me every hour. He didn't talk much. He watched. He wrote things down. He asked questions that showed he was actually listening. On day 6, he caught a feed water imbalance before I did. I didn't say anything. I just nodded. He understood. By week 3, production was back to 1,800 tons. Harwick Packaging returned their contract after I called their operations director personally. A man named Tom Fielding I'd worked with for 18 years. Virgil, he said, I don't do business with Olmsted Paper Mill. I do business with you. Morrison Printing re-signed 3 days later. Dennis Whitfield reviewed the 7% ownership agreement on a Tuesday. Found it clean. I signed it Wednesday morning at 9 a.m. in Russell's office at the oak desk with the same pen Russell had used to sign my original employment agreement 26 years earlier. Virgil R. Harding, Chief Plant Engineer / partner. Tessa Olmsted moved back to San Francisco. I heard from Carter that she updated her LinkedIn profile 3 days after being fired. The post said she was exploring new opportunities in operational strategy consulting and thanked her grandfather for the incredible learning experience. It had 214 likes, most of them from people who had never been inside a boiler room. Last Friday, first Friday of the month, Daniel came for dinner. I made pot roast, Maggie's recipe, the one with the rosemary and the red potatoes. We sat at the kitchen table. He asked about the mill. Running smooth, I said. Are you going to keep coming to my certification tests? Everyone. He nodded, took another bite of pot roast. Then he said, Mom would have liked seeing you like this. Settled. Like you belong somewhere again. I didn't say anything. I didn't need to. Rex was under the table, warm against my feet. The smokestack was visible through the kitchen window, exhaust rising steady and pale against the evening sky. The right color. I could tell from here. Sometimes justice doesn't roar. It builds pressure, quietly, in a system that the people in charge never bothered to understand. And when it releases, it doesn't explode. It just moves everything back to where it was supposed to be. If you enjoyed this story, hit that like button and let me know what you think in the comments. And if you haven't subscribed yet, subscribe and ring that notification bell to get alerts about new stories like this one. Thanks for watching. See you in the next video.